No time to lose. Jack Sparks leaned back in the soft brown recline. He locked his hands behind his head and stared at the old photograph of his great-grandfather, Edmund Wilton Sparks, that hung on the living room wall. The photograph was fading behind its glass, but great-grandfather Sparks' stern face gazed intently at Jake. "Okay, great-grandpa," Jack said aloud, "I've got a new mystery for you. How would you find a missing monkey?" "Great-grams can't hear you, Jake," his little sister Bridget said. "He's been dead 60 years. 65? Anyway," Bridget said, "you know he didn't help you with the last mystery you solved. I did that." Bridget beamed triumphantly at Jake. It was true, and Jake knew it. It had been Bridget who'd nudged him in the right direction last time when he had been searching for the lost goldfish. "I admit it, but I'm going to solve this one. I'm bending all my mental powers on this one problem. You'll see, I'll figure it out." Bridget mumbled something about Jake thinking he had all the answers. Then she grabbed a doll from underneath the couch and wandered out of the living room. Jake leaned back in the chair and thought about how the case of the missing monkey had begun. It was the first day of school. Jake thought it seemed like every other first day of school he'd ever seen. There were the brand new clothes and the squeaky clean backpacks. There were school books that still looked shiny and new, and shoes that were not yet scuffed up. Jake and his friend Nathan walked from the 6th grade room at Philpott Christian School to the Philpott Public Library as they had done the first day of school for the last 2 years. They counted their steps as they walked. Last year, it took 975 steps, but this year, since their legs were longer, it didn't take as many. 952, Jake and Nathan said together as they stomped up to the front door of the library. "Hi, Miss Hancock," Jake said. "And we're here," Nathan said, probably a little too loud for library. "It's good to see you," Miss Hancock replied. She tucked a wisp of her gray hair behind her ear and smoothed her skirt down. "Are you going to be joining the library club again this year, Nathan?" "Yes, ma'am," Nathan said, smiling. "That's why I'm here. Mom says it's my civic duty to help you and to read to little kids." "And what about you, Mr. Sparks? Are you joining the library club too?" "Yes, ma'am," Jake said. "Mom says I can join if I'm home in time to do my chores in the evening." "That will be perfectly fine," Miss Hancock said. "What chores do you have to do?" "I feed the chickens. I tend a big plot of tomatoes, I'm supposed to anyway, dig out the weeds, watch for bugs, that sort of thing. Plus, keeping the garage cleaned up, practicing, doing homework, you know, all the regular stuff." "Sounds like a lot of regular stuffs," Miss Hancock said, smiling. Jake loved the library, and he loved Miss Hancock. Miss Hancock would help you find any book you needed, and if you wanted to keep it longer than it was checked out for, she didn't care. She could also help you with your homework and could work out long division problems in her head. Miss Hancock had been the Philpott Library's librarian since before Jake was born. But she wasn't the only wonderful thing about the library. There was also Barney, Miss Hancock's pet monkey. Usually, Barney would sit on the floor doing nothing, but sometimes he would shriek suddenly and scare everyone, though they usually ended up laughing when they calmed down from the fright. Jake knew there probably wasn't another public library like Philpott's in the whole country. "Well, don't stand outside in the heat. Come on in." She held the door open for them, and they walked into the cool of the library. A few minutes later, the first meeting of the Junior Library Club at the Philpott Public Library was called to order. Miss Hancock tapped a wooden gavel on her desk. "This meeting will come to order. I'd like to officially welcome you to this year's Library Club. I'm counting on all of you to help me reshelf the books in the right places, read to little children in the children's room, and generally make the Philpott Library a happy place. Are we all agreed?" 15 heads nodded yes. "Good. Now let me call Barney. As you know, Barney's my dear friend and confidant. If I hear you've been naughty, I'll whisper it in Barney's ear and he'll eat your homework." All the kids laughed, and Jake wondered if Barney wasn't the only thing unique about Philpott's library. Maybe Miss Hancock was a bit out of the ordinary too. "Barney," Miss Hancock called. There was no answer, so she tried again. "Barney!" Jake and the other kids got up and looked around, but Barney was nowhere to be found. "Well, don't worry," Miss Hancock said. "He never misses dinner, and tonight I'm serving his favorite salad and a big bowl of mashed potatoes. He'll be home for that, I know." Barney did not return by dinner time, and the next day found Miss Hancock fluttering with anxiety. She was unable to speak to the library clubbers, though she smiled at them as they went about their tasks of putting books back on shelves and straightening magazines. "He's lost," some kids said. "He's stolen," others whispered. By the second day, there was no doubt. Barney was missing for good. A reporter from the Philpott Stew showed up at the library for an interview with Miss Hancock. Jake Sparks watched from the children's room where he pretended to be interested in reading a book to several toddlers, when he really wanted to be doing was rushing out to tell the reporter to sound an urgent alarm for the return of Barney. There was no time to lose. The fact was, he'd seen Miss Hancock crying, and he didn't like that one bit. That was the night Jake sat in the recliner and asked his long-deceased great-grandfather's picture for help. Of course, no help came. The next morning, Jake was transfixed by the front page of the Philpott Stew. Above the news of a hurricane in Alabama and a fire in Montana was a picture of a distressed Miss Hancock, and this headline: "Beloved librarian offers $200 for Barney's safe return." That evening, Jake absent-mindedly poured Italian dressing on his French fries and ketchup on his salad. He said yes when his father asked how his day had been, and handed his mother the pitcher of lemonade when she asked him to please pass the tomato slices. Bridget giggled into her hand, but didn't say anything. "Is something wrong, Jake?" Mr. Sparks asked. "Tuesday." "Jake, look at me," his father said. "Jake, look up. Are you all right?" "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I'm thinking about Barney. How can I find him? I rush out right after dinner tonight. I think I can find him. Dad, there's a $200 reward. What about your chores? If you're monkey hunting, when will you finish them? And what about your homework and your trumpet practice?" "But Dad, what's a couple of days of homework or practice when you consider $200? I could start my college fund. I could buy a new skateboard. I could—" "He's in the tomatoes," Bridget said. "Who?" "Barney." Jake poked at the tomato sliced on the plate and said, "No, sis, he's not. Look, Dad, I figured it all out. Monkeys are jungle animals, right? That means they want to be in the jungle. Philpott isn't exactly a jungle, so Barney has run away from the library to find a jungle. All we have to do is look in the jungliest looking place around here, and there will be Barney." He wiped his mouth with a napkin and beamed around the table at his family. "See, it's simple, sis," he said to Bridget. He tapped his head. "You've just got to use your noggin." Jake stood up. "So I'm off to the park, Dad. I've got a monkey to capture." "Not so fast, son," Mrs. Sparks said. "There's the small detail of your evening chores." "Chores, s'mores. When I've got those $200, I'll hire a maid for you, Mom. I'm doing this for all of us." Dad turned a stern gaze at Jake. Jake swallowed hard. "Sorry, Mom. What I meant to say was, may I please look for Barney after I do my chores?" "After your chores and after your homework, if it's not too late." It was too late. By the time the chickens were fed and the weeds were pulled, it was 8 o'clock. By the time Jake had practiced and finished up his math homework, it was bedtime. Maybe tomorrow, he thought. What's the reward? The next day was the same. While other kids poured out into the afternoon in bunches of 3s and 4s to look for Barney, Jake trudged home with Bridget so they could do their chores and their homework, their music practice, and their family devotions. "Never mind, son," Mr. Sparks said. "Your job is not to get rewards. I'm sure Barney will be found soon. Your job is to do your work well and trust God to take care of all your needs. But Dad, I'd get $200 if I found him. And if you didn't find him, you'd be behind on your homework, behind on your trumpet practice, and behind on your chores. The vegetable garden would completely fall apart, and your chickens would starve to death. But Dad, no buts. There are plenty of kids looking for Barney. We need your help here at home. No wild monkey chases for you. What about me, Daddy? Bridget said. She was sitting in the rocking chair, braiding her doll's hair. Can I find Barney? He's in the tomatoes. The tomatoes? She said that last night, Jake said. He snickered, but he didn't admit that he'd looked all through the tomato plants before school that morning. There was no monkey there, just a few broken plants where a dog must have run through and some half-eaten tomatoes the birds were after.
The library club hadn't met since Barney got lost. Miss Hancock was distracted and frantic. She roamed around the library, looking in corners and peering out the windows. She cried often. Jake felt uncomfortable around her and stayed away. On Friday, Nathan caught up with him as he walked home from school. Nathan carried a large cage made of chicken wire and led an enormous dog on a leash. "Come on, Jake," Nathan said. "See, I've got a monkey-catching cage and my Rottweiler Hamlet. We're gonna plop the cage on top of Barney and then make Hamlet sit on it until the police arrive." "Sorry," Jake said. "I can't. Chores." Another boy ran by with a rope. "I've been practicing with the lasso. I'm going to catch that monkey by his tail and drag him into town." Saturday's stew revealed that although hope was growing dimmer for Barney's safe return, many people were still looking diligently. Jake felt foolish that he couldn't help out, but he knew he had to obey his father. He felt worse when he read that the reward money had been increased by Miss Hancock's assistant librarian and now stood at $500. "Coming with us today?" Nathan asked on Monday. "You know I can't," Jake said. "My dad says I have to do my regular homework and chores." "That's too bad," Nathan said, "because I can feel it in my bones. Today's the day I'm gonna sneak up on that critter and bag him." "What happened to your cage and the big dog?" "It was too flimsy," Nathan said. "Hamlet sat on it and crushed it. Besides, I never did see Barney." While his friends went monkey hunting that day, Jake Sparks studied alone in the Philpott Library. He wrote his spelling words into sentences, made a list of 35 adjectives, and filled in blanks on a worksheet about the ancient Sumerians. He didn't say much at dinner. There didn't seem to be anything to say. Everyone else had been out looking for the monkey, and he had been tossing corn to chickens. Bridget said, "He's in the tomatoes again," but Jake glared at her. Tuesday's edition of the stew featured a color picture of Mayor Stubbs and the town council smiling over the diminutive form of Miss Hancock. The caption read, "Council aids leading citizen." Jake read the article and sighed deeply. The leadership of Philpott had pitched in to help. She has been a pillar in the community of Philpott as long as any of us can remember, Mayor Stubbs was quoted as saying. Barney was a gift of the Junior Library Club several years ago. He has been a wonderful companion for Miss Hancock, and we are deeply grieved that he is missing. We have all contributed to the Find Barney Fund, which has now reached a total reward of $500 for the safe return of Barney, Philpott's most prized monkey. Jake swallowed hard. $500! Even his father would have to admit that was worth having. "Mom, did you see this?" Jake held out the picture. "How can I get Dad to let me join the search teams?" "Yes, I saw it, Jake, but I don't think Dad's going to change his mind. Rushing out to make a quick dollar isn't the way to prosperity for most people. Dad wants you to be steady and responsible. Maybe if you finish everything up early tonight, we can all go out and look around for that monkey, but not for the money." "Why not for the money?" "That's not why you should look for Miss Hancock's monkey, son." The next day, Jake went to see Miss The two of them sat in the library on plush couches. Miss Hancock always said it was better to read in comfort than in pain. "I don't think he'll come back, you know. He's been gone a long time now, and after all, maybe a monkey should be free. Maybe he didn't like living in a house alone with an old lady like me. You know I'm almost 70 years old, Jake, and maybe a lady of 70 shouldn't tie her affections up in a monkey. Maybe Barney knew it was time to make his own way in the world." Jake laughed a little, but sadly. "I'd look for him, but my dad won't let me. He said I should work hard at my regular chores and homework and not rush off for get-rich schemes." "Get-rich schemes?" Miss Hancock sat up straight. "Do you mean the kids are all looking for Barney just for the reward? Not because I miss him? Not because he's lost?" Jake cringed under her gaze. "I guess so," he said. "I don't really know." "Can you believe she canceled the reward and called the search off?" Nathan said. The library club was full again, and the kids put books back on shelves and read stories to small children instead of spending their afternoons on the monkey search. "That money was practically in my pocket. I know I was just about to find old Barney." "Never mind that monkey," a girl said. "It's over, so it's over. Let's read." Jake looked over at Miss Hancock, who sat behind the book checkout counter. She seemed older and sadder than she had been the day before. "Dad, I've got to find that monkey," Jake said at dinner. "What's the reward up to?" Mr. Sparks asked. "No reward," Jake said. "But Miss Hancock really misses Barney. She needs him." Mr. Sparks looked up from his dinner plate and gazed deeply into Jake's eyes. Jake was a little bit afraid of what his father would say. After all, this was the third time he'd asked permission to look for Barney, but he didn't look away. Mr. Sparks smiled. "Let's clean up dinner and think about where a monkey would hide. We'll do this together, for Miss Hancock." "He's in the tomatoes," Bridget said. "Stop with the tomatoes, okay?" Jake said, his voice rising. "Why do you keep saying that?" "Because he's in the tomatoes. I've seen him." "You've seen him?" "I've been trying to tell you all along." Half an hour later, Mr. and Mrs. Sparks, Bridget, and Jake sat quietly in the backyard, each of them at a corner of the large tomato plot. They sat perfectly still. Time ticked slowly by. No one spoke. At last, a dark something moved quickly through the plants. Jake's heart pounded. He heard a sharp gasp from Bridget, but knew not to say anything. They must all be as quiet as possible. Snap. Splat. There, 10 feet away from him sat Barney, the monkey, chewing tomatoes. Snap. The tomato branch broke. Splat. Barney bit right through the juicy tomato. I saw his mother's shadowed figure slip quietly back towards the house. It was her job to call Miss Hancock if they spotted Barney. It seemed forever, but probably only a very few minutes passed before Jake sensed the small presence of Miss Hancock standing next to him. She was trembling with excitement. "Barney boy," she whispered. "Come to Mama. Come on, sweetheart. It's time to come home." The snapping and splatting stopped. "Barney, sweetie," Miss Hancock said. "Don't you want to come home now?" Her voice was quivering. I thought she might burst into tears. And then, all in a rush, Barney flung himself onto Miss Hancock, and Miss Hancock wrapped him up in a great hug. He twined his arms around her neck and shrieked, his mouth wide open in a great monkey grin. "It's not fair," Nathan said. He tossed his school books down on the library's reading table and elbowed Jake in the ribs. "If she'd kept the reward on, we'd have kept looking for him too." Jake smiled. He knew that Miss Hancock's joy in having Barney back was a gift enough, though if he was strictly honest, he would have to admit that $500 would have been nice. "Don't worry about it, Jake," Bridget said that evening as the two of them sat in the living room playing checkers. "You can't help it if you've got a brilliant little sister living down the hall." Jake leaned back in the soft brown recliner and looked at Great-Grandpa Edmund hanging as stern as always on the wall. "Hey, Grandpa, Do you have any advice for dealing with smart little sisters? He can't hear you, Bridget said. He's been dead for 60 years. 65, Jake said.